Hey, welcome into the hot shop, everyone. Thank you. We're working on some pieces that we actually have on display on our front pedestals. These are some really good examples anyways. So they're all different forms and shapes and sizes. We're just sticking with the same theme of the rainbow striping, which is actually coming from something called cane, these sticks of colored glass that we have inside of those cups and inside of that box there, which we prepared some little cups of those patterns earlier. So we are kind of skipping that first step for now, and we're just gonna get started right away on our next piece, starting with that little cup of patterned glass. And this is our resident hot shop team. I'll mention again, these guys are professionals. They work with glass as a full-time job, and they've been working with glass for about 20 to 30 years individually, a little over 30 years for some. And let me start with an overview of the hot shop real quick too, just to get you oriented with what you're seeing in here. And then of course, feel free to ask any questions that you have as I continue. So this is the glass furnace, this tank with the closed door, where we actually hold our clear molten glass at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is inside of a large ceramic crucible, so just quite literally a pool of molten glass. So we stick the end of our pipe into the glass, we give it a twist, and then we end up with a ball of glass on the end. So that's what we very first start with. No matter the project, we have to pick up a little bit of clear. And then in our case, we had prepared these cups of glass, which we set aside in the garage. This is sitting at 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just warm enough to keep the glass from breaking. I always call it warm. I know it's pretty hot to us. And then we make the glass malleable again inside of this large open face furnace up to 2300 degrees Fahrenheit in there. And these pieces so far today have been pretty quick, each of them taking a little under 30 minutes or so. So we have this torch here. We'll use this later on to heat up specific sections of the glass, but we also use it to heat up either just preheating tools, or in this case, we were heating up a tool to dip it through some wax, some solid beeswax, which are on these blades right now. So these are the jacks. And we will use these basically from beginning to end for all of our pieces. That's just a bucket of water. Yeah. We dip the end of the glass in there to cool it rapidly so we can actually use that little ball of glass as a handle. And this is how we get the spiral of color. We actually hold on to the end of the bubble and we're just turning the pipe kind of in one spot, twisting the glass on itself. And welcome into the hot shop, everyone. So we have our resident hot shop team on the floor today. These guys work full-time at the museum, and we are specifically working on some store items. I don't know if I mentioned that to you guys who were in here earlier either, but yeah, these pieces are eventually going onto the museum store shelves. And we're continuing with the same theme of the rainbow striping, but we're just changing up the shape and the piece each time we make these pieces. And no, they do not have any diagrams or drawings or anything that they're basing these pieces off of. They're just kind of coming off the top of Gabe's head. Now this large metal table, we use this to shape the glass, but we also use it to cool the glass down. So when we roll the bubble across it, it's sucking heat out of the glass. It's going to prevent it from blowing out too much in that one direction. Want to blow it out a little thinner around the pipe versus the bottom. And then we use this pad, which is actually just folded up newspaper that we've splashed with a little bit of water. This is as close as we'll get to using our hands to shape the glass. And for those of you who joined in a little bit later, I just wanted to point out again that the pieces on the front pedestals are a really good example of what we're working on today. So just all sorts of different shapes, but all of these pieces have the same theme, which is that rainbow striping. And that's coming specifically from cane, which are these sticks of colored glass inside of those cups and inside of that box over there. Yeah, as we blow this out, the color will become a little bit clearer. So this time we focus more of the heat towards the very end of the bubble, which, as you could tell already, this is going to become the bottom of the piece. And this is always what we do. We start with the bottom of the piece furthest away from the pipe. That's what we blow out and finish. And then next, we attach a pipe to the bottom, break it off of this pipe, and then we can work on the top. It's a process we have to go through for every blown piece. And I like pointing this out to people, but you won't be able to see this from where you're sitting, but on the bottom of finished pieces, you'll often see a little mark where that pipe was attached to the bottom at some point and then broken away. So whenever I go like antique shopping, sometimes I'll look at the bottom of pieces. Now we're completely flattening the bottom down with the wooden paddle on the bottom and the jacks on the side of the piece, which means that we're pretty close to that next step of attaching the pipe to the bottom. Now, because we're working with cane, again, those sticks of colored glass, these pieces of cane are kind of close to the surface of the piece, or actually directly on the surface of the piece. So when we attach that pipe to the bottom and then eventually break it away, that has the potential of chipping a little bit of the color off. So we add this little pad of clear to the bottom to protect all the color before we attach that pipe. So now that we're ready, we bring that second pipe over. We'll attach it right to the center of the bottom. And then we'll break the piece off of that first pipe with a little bit of thermal shock, very controlled break. So we place a dot of water and then tap the pipe, and it just pops right off. Now with bigger pieces that have thick connections, you might see them really whack the pipe. It's kind of a fun, intense moment, but for this, it's just a little dink and then it pops off. So now we have flipped the orientation of the piece. We could start to open it up from the top and finish it off. And again, for people who've been joining in later, this is where we're getting all of our glass in the first place. Trent just gathered a little bit of clear glass out of that tank with the closed door. And this is sitting at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. I always want to give you guys that temperature so you understand how hot it is in here, what temperatures we're working with. He's going to be picking up some colored glass over top of that clear and forming just a bit that we bring over and wrap around the opening of the piece, like this right here. This is called a lip wrap, just a little pop of color. So we bring that small bit of color over, and it's as simple as lightly touching it to the lip of the piece, and then as we turn, it follows all the way around. And now we have that little pop of color. So after opening this up the rest of the way, this piece is done. We're just preparing to break it off of the pipe and put it away. And when we put this piece away, it's going to go inside of the annealer over on the left wall, that large black box over there. This sits at 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to slowly cool the glass down, usually overnight or about 12-ish hours. And I know that seems like a long time. Glass has to cool very slowly to prevent thermal shock, so it's very controlled cooling. So same as earlier, to break it off, we apply some water. And then all it takes is a tap of the pipe. We'll torch the bottom to get rid of leftover sharp ends that might remain. And then we're completely done with this piece. And let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. And off into the annealer it goes. So I think that's like our 5th or 6th piece today. We've been making these every 20 to 30 minutes or so. And we'll start a new one pretty soon, right off the bat. I do have a cool video to show you guys how we get the cane in the first place, those sticks of colored glass, because that's one part of the process that we're not going to see today. So could I have the cane pulling video, please? Thank you. Now this is a silent video, so I'll just describe what's happening as it goes along. So we always start with our colored glass on the pipe for this particular cane. Colored glass gets shipped in bar form, which we then break sections off of and melt down and use, so we don't make color ourselves. We then wrap a couple layers of clear around it. You could actually see that layer of clear on the outside of the colored glass before forming this into a cylinder for the perfectly round cane that we're making, and then attaching a second pipe, stretching it, well, like pulling taffy. I know, it's satisfying. And then we just cut it up into usable segments. It depends on the piece, how long we would want these, usually about pencil length, pencil width. And then we roll it up over top of a clear bubble, which this is actually exactly what we did for these pieces in particular. We roll up the cane over a clear bubble. And then you can further alter that design. You can leave it stick straight, or you can twist it, you can stuff it into a mold. There's so many different things you can do with that texture or with the pattern. So yeah. Yeah, it's pretty satisfying. So we're starting right off from the top. We have these cups of glass that have the striping on them already inside of this box right here. So we're picking up one more of those. So for those who haven't heard about this piece of equipment yet, this sits at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a flame in the corner in there, just keeping that glass warm. If it were any colder, then it could crack when exposed to the heat that we're working with in the hot shop. So we have to keep it at a pretty steady, warm temperature. Yeah, exactly. We have a pipe cooler over there, which is just a trough of water that we set the pipe into. And this is mostly just to get better leverage. We can get our hands closer to the glass, and then we're not having to deal with all the weight with it being so far away from us. So after getting some more heat built up in the glass, we come over to the marver, this metal table, and it's a little subtle, so hopefully you guys noticed, but we were kind of just letting the tip of the glass touch the table, and we were turning in one spot. So we're actually twisting the glass onto itself, and that's how we go from stick straight to spiraled glass. So we formed this little ball of glass on the end of the bubble, and we keep dipping it in water, just cooling it down so that we can use it as a handle like he is now, holding on, stretching the glass, and twisting it as Trent blows into the end of the pipe. So this pad right here, this is actually just folded up newspaper that we'll splash a little bit of water on. And this is especially helpful for guiding which way we want the bubble to blow out. If we push directly on the bottom or the end of the bubble, for example, it's going to blow out sideways, create this really squat, wide bubble, etc. And we just preheated the jacks, which are these two metal blades that will dip through beeswax. We'll use these to stretch a neck into our piece, kind of holding on to a section of our bubble and then pulling away from the pipe. So there's a lot of little subtle moves that we've done to get to this shape. Like we have a really long shape. We did a little bit of pulling and stretching earlier, but we've also done a lot of gravity shaping. So when we heat up the glass and we're walking back to the bench, we just hang it down a little bit and then it's going to stretch out towards the floor. Or when you see Gabe swinging the pipe or spinning, like you saw a little bit briefly, he's using centrifugal force to pull the glass out faster than gravity would. And now at this point, we're flattening the bottom with a wooden paddle. This is a moment where you need 3 people. And it's important to have usually 3 or 4 people for one team because we're capping the end of the pipe, keeping pressure inside the piece. We're keeping the tool on the side. We're keeping the wooden paddle on the bottom. That's a minimum of 3 people. Oh yeah, so we will flatten the bottom of the piece, and then we bring over a little bit of clear glass and we attach it to the bottom and create basically this little pad of clear on the bottom. And this is going to protect the bottom from the pipe that we attach next. We're going to attach a second pipe to the bottom of the piece pretty soon. And this is something I've been showing off throughout the day. It's going to be basically impossible for you guys to see, but there's like a little mark from where that pipe was attached to the bottom here. And the cane, those lines of color, are almost directly on the surface of the glass. So when we break that pipe away at the very end, it has the potential to chip away at the color. So we're just protecting it with a little bit of clear. And this is something they made out of, I think, leftover or scrap color the other day. Kind of fun. That's a great question. So these pieces are actually all going into the Museum of Glass store eventually. So yeah, they will be for sale soon. And usually I think they put them out on the shelves at 3 days or so from when they make them. They want to just make sure that they have a nice selection for people to choose from. So now we attach that second pipe to the bottom. We apply some water to that weak point, that connection point, and then we tap the pipe to pop it off. So by doing that whole process there, we flip the orientation of the piece. So now we can open up the top. So over on the right bench, Trent has been preparing a little bit of color that he'll bring over and will wrap around the opening of the piece. It's called a lip wrap, just a rim of a color, just a nice little pop of color. And this is why we have 2 benches set up, so we can work on 2 things that we eventually bring together. So our glass technically starts moving at a little over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, probably somewhere like 1,100, you know. There's a very specific point. But at that point, it's going to be moving very little. So the temperature that we keep our glass at is at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, 2,100. And at that temperature, the glass is textured a lot like honey. And that's pretty much as hot as we get it in here. If it's hotter than that, the glass is an uncontrollable texture. It's like runny, you know. We want it thick to a certain extent. Now we're watering this off. And all it'll take is a little tap of the pipe, and then we're done with another piece. Torch the bottom to get rid of those sharp ends, and this goes inside of the annealer, which if you guys haven't seen this box already, this box sits at 900 degrees Fahrenheit and will slowly cool this piece down overnight. That's how long it takes for this glass to properly cool without cracking. And there's another piece put away. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, of course. And then it's on to the next one. It's a continuous demonstration. So I know you guys joined in more recently. No worries, because we're going to get started on the next one pretty soon here. And welcome into the hot shop. We're going to be working on some vessels like you see on the front pedestals on either side of me. So we're sticking with the theme of that rainbow striping, but other than that, we're really changing up the shape for every single piece that we make. I haven't seen a repeat so far. And we already have our patterned cup of glass right here. This just has stick straight striping, rainbow striping that we have to now twist and work with to turn into our final piece. And can we have a view of the center bench, please? Thank you. So we'll be working at the center bench here for the most part. So the first step is starting to twist this. We're using the marver to do that. We're basically just holding it in one spot on that metal table and turning the pipe, which is twisting the glass on itself. So we've already blown this out quite a bit. We'll use a couple of different methods of heating up the glass. This torch we use on just one area of the glass at a time. We were heating up the area next to the pipe in preparation specifically for this right here. We're using the jacks, these two metal blades, and we're squeezing down right off the end of the pipe to create a weak point or a breaking point that we'll use pretty soon. And once we have the jack line, then we can start really blowing this out and getting our final shape. And at this point, we're flattening the bottom of the piece with a wooden paddle. And we're gathering up one small bit of clear to bring over and attach to the bottom of the piece. This is going to turn into a little pad on the bottom and basically just protect the bottom from the second pipe that we attach. So now we attach that second pipe to the bottom of the piece. We wait for that connection to set up for a second, and then we break the piece off of its original pipe with some water and a little tap. And just like that, we have basically flipped the orientation of the piece. So now we can work on the top half of the piece. And this is what we do for all blown pieces. We blow it out, flatten the bottom, we attach that pipe, and then we work on the opposite side. So we're at the point now where we're ready for the lip wrap, which once again you'll see on these finished pieces, especially the ones to your left or my right. These have a really bright red rim just from the opening of the piece, and this is how they do that. Just lightly attach that bit of color and then wrap it all the way around. Now we can finish opening this up like normal. Hey, welcome into the hot shop, you guys. So we have technically already gotten started. We just picked up a cup of this colored patterned glass. It already has rainbow striping on it, familiar. Yeah, right over there. Sarah's just cooling the pipe down in a trough of water real quick. We'll use this to turn it into something like we see on the front pedestals. These are some really good examples that have been made over the past couple of days or so. And these are eventually going into the Museum of Glass store. So I know it's really hard to see the colors and patterns right now. It's just stick straight. And once we get enough heat, this is when we'll see them start to alter the pattern. For most of them, we've just been twisting them into a spiral, but for a couple that we've seen, we've also seen this wigwag pattern, so it's called, this sort of zigzagging pattern here, which is really fun. Yeah, so it looks like we have enough heat that we're just starting to twist it. We'll let the glass just stay in one spot on this table, and as we turn the pipe, the glass will twist onto itself. And just to point out, the temperatures that we're working with in here are between 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. All the equipment along the wall is running between that temperature. And then we also will have this torch lit right here behind the bench that we'll use every once in a while, all around the same temperature. And at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit, the glass is completely molten to the texture of honey. I know, it's like we're working with lava on the end of a stick. So we have already lengthened this bubble quite a bit. Earlier we were preparing it by heating it and then cooling certain areas. We actually cooled down the very end of the bubble by dipping it in some water even. I don't know if anyone noticed that. Just so that we could use that cold end of the glass as a handle to twist the rest of the bubble. So now we have a really tight spiral in the glass. And then we use the paper. So this is literally just folded up newspaper that will splash with a little bit of water. We're using this to shape the bubble essentially with our hands, because the paper conforms to the shape of our hands. And for those who just joined in, we're working on some pieces that are a lot like what we're seeing on the front pedestals on either side of me. We're sticking to that same rainbow theme. We have a rainbow of colors. These sticks of colored glass on this table here were used to achieve this pattern. Just lay them all out on a metal tray or metal plate, has grooves in it. We'll heat them up and then we'll roll them up on a bubble. And we'll see how this piece turns out. Each of the pieces that we're making today are completely different from one another, as you're seeing on the front pedestals as well. Just kind of making anything that comes off the top of Gabe's head. Gabe's the one who's sitting and working at the bench. And the person who sits and works at the bench, they're called the gaffer, kind of like the glass blowing team leader. So, kind of like magic, Gabe holds on to a section of the glass with the jacks, these two metal blades, and then pulls away from the pipe, and that stretches a neck into the section of the glass that he has not grabbed. And then with this remaining section at the very end, this is the entire base of the piece, so we can blow this out a lot further. It should be pretty thick still, so we have a lot of material to work with. And welcome into the hot shop to everyone who just joined in. We have some example pieces of what we're making today on our front pedestals on either side of me. And as you could tell, all these pieces are turning out different shapes and sizes. The one theme that we're sticking to is we're continuing to use the cane, which are these sticks of colored glass, to create rainbow striping throughout our final pieces. So we already have the color and the pattern in this. We're just finishing blowing out the bottom. And it's looking like this will be a vase. And once we're pretty much finished with the bottom, we bring over a bit of clear and smash that on into basically this little pad of clear. And this is exactly where we're going to be attaching a second pipe pretty soon. This little pad of clear protects the bottom where we attach it. And we use this really hot handheld torch to heat up the bottom and only the bottom, leaving the rest of the glass alone. And now we can completely flatten the bottom using a wooden paddle. So now we bring that second pipe over, attach it right to the center of the bottom of the piece. And once that connection is set up for a second, we apply some water, cracking that connection, and then just tap the pipe to pop it off. It's a pretty quick move, but there's a lot of work that went into doing it correctly, making sure everything was the correct temperature. We had a really nice breaking point. And now we're ready to work on the top half of the vase. And for those who just joined in, we are working on some pieces kind of like what you see on the front pedestals on either side of me, where of course you can see we have a variety of shapes. We're just working with the same color scheme for each piece. So we trim just a little bit of glass away right off the opening. This is usually just to get rid of some excess thickness right where it was connected to the previous pipe, but sometimes we're trimming down on length as well. And over on the right bench, Trent is preparing a bit of colored glass that'll be brought over and wrapped around the opening of the piece, which creates that bright rim of color like you see with these ones. And once we have that lip wrap, we just open it up to its full size. And then the piece is pretty much done. Sometimes there will be some final little touches that they need to do if something has fallen off center or if the piece needs to be rounded out a little bit more, for example, but pretty much done with this piece. As you can see, these pieces only take about 20 to 30 minutes each. They're pretty quick. Not all pieces are like that, that's for sure. So it looks like right here we are going to be rounding the glass out a little bit, puffing it out a little bit. Using the Soffietta, we block off the opening with that cone and then blow into the opposite end to reinflate the glass. So it looks like we're satisfied with our piece. So we'll prepare to break it off by torching the glass connecting the piece and the pipe together until we see some movement in that connection. And then we know that it's ready. We can apply some water, crack that connection, and pop the piece off. And that'll be another piece done. So we're going in with that water, thermally shocking that connection. And then with the tap of the pipe, that piece should pop right off. Then we just torch the bottom, get rid of leftover sharp ends that might remain, and we're done with this piece. They make it all look so easy. It's because they have so many years of experience. This is their full-time job, and a lot of them have been working with glass for about 20 to 30 years. Gabe, the one who's sitting down, I think he said something like 34 or 35 years. Yeah. And then it's on to the next one. It never stops. Yeah, of course. Hey, welcome into the Hot Shop V2. We're going to get started on a piece kind of like what you see on the two front pedestals on either side of me. So we're just doing all sorts of different shapes. The only thing that we are sticking to for all these pieces is we're continuing to use the cane, which are these sticks of colored glass on that little table in the front there to create the rainbow striping on the finished product. So we're going to see them actually work with the cane next, which is something we've only seen twice today. So kind of cool that you're here for that. So I just want to point out a couple of important pieces of equipment that we'll see them working with throughout the process. So in the beginning, we'll see them use the furnace, this tank with the closed door right here. Glass furnace. It actually holds molten glass inside of it, inside of a large ceramic crucible at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's kind of the texture of honey. When we first pick it up, all we have to do is stick our pipe into the molten glass and then give it a twist, and then we end up with a ball of glass on the end. And to get bigger pieces, because we always have to start with like this much glass, we have to let that cool down and then gather again, let it cool down and then gather again, and it kind of grows exponentially each time. And we'll see them gather, I think, 3 layers of clear before we pick up the cane, which we're laying out right now at the center bench. And another important piece of equipment these large open face furnaces at each bench, and these are to reheat the glass. They run between 21 and 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little bit warmer. And we just have 2 of them on at the moment so that we can work at 2 places at the same time. There's not really a significant difference between the 2. So for those who just joined in, because I do see a couple new faces, we're going to be working on various shapes like you see on the front pedestals, either side of the hot shop. The theme that we're sticking with, though, is we're going to be working with this rainbow striping from something called cane, which are these sticks of colored glass that we have laid out at the center bench right now. So we're going to be preheating this pretty soon, the entire metal plate and everything. We're going to stick it into that big oven and heat it up a little bit further, and then we'll roll a clear bubble of glass over top of it to pick it up. And could we have a view of the right bench as Trent's preparing this bubble? So over here on the right bench, we have a little bit of clear glass on the end of our pipe, which we are using a block on right now, this wooden spoon-shaped tool. We're smoothing and evening this glass out, and the wood's not burning because we actually keep it saturated in water whenever we're not using it. So we're now heating up that cane. We want to heat it up until we see a little bit of a glow to it almost. And then with this bubble of glass, we just gathered a little bit of clear. We let a lot of it drip off into a bucket. We just wanted to get a hot coating of glass on the outside, but not necessarily gather up a bunch of mass. And everything that falls into that bucket is all clear glass. So eventually we crush it up, throw it into the furnace, and completely reuse it. And now we head on over with our bubble and roll it over top of the cane to pick it up. So now that we have our cane, we'll work on smoothing this cane out until we have a pretty smooth finish on the surface of our bubble. And then what we'll do with this is we're actually going to blow it out and then lengthen it into basically this tube of blown glass. And then with that tube, we section it off and we create multiple, this is not a super great example, but multiple cups of glass that have the striping on it. And then we can use those individual cups to blow these smaller forms like this, because this is actually a lot of glass that we have on the end of our pipe right here. We definitely don't need that much unless we're making a piece like this. So they get it to its full length first. And then they section the end of the bubble off. Because again, we do want to turn this into a tube of glass, basically, which means it has to be open-ended on either side. So when we section the end of this bubble off, we're not cinching all the way down, just squeezing down a little bit to create a weak point. And then we quite literally knock or break this end piece off. And that leaves us with a small opening. So now that we've turned this into a tube, we can start sectioning it off into these cups of colored glass. And we'll just break these off one by one and set them aside in the garage. And this is a really important piece of equipment that we use almost all the time. This box gets or sits at just about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just warm enough to keep the glass from breaking and just cold enough to keep it from melting and moving. So we'll set our piece of glass inside in there. And then we'll section this off all the way down. I think we usually will create 3 or 4 sections out of this. So now that we have some heat in this glass, Gabe is going to start twisting it on the Marver, this metal table here, by kind of just resting the glass on the tip and then turning in one spot. And that's really dragging, twisting the glass onto itself. And that's how we get this spiral in a lot of these pieces. Just in case anyone else is curious about this, we did see this one time today, but this texture design right here is called a wigwag, where it zigzags back and forth. And the way that this is made, you start with your stick straight stripes like we already had. And then we take the hot torch, which is this smaller handheld torch just to the right of where Gabe is working. It's not lit right now or anything, but we take that. It has this bright blue flame. It gets up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's going to very quickly heat up the glass. We heat up just one little section at a time, a little ring around the entire bubble. And then we hold on to the end of the bubble and we turn the pipe, and it just twists that one section. We let that cool down. We heat up the next section. We twist it in the opposite direction, and we continue down as many times as we want to get that back and forth zigzagging or wigwagging. And it's actually a flame working technique. It's used in pipe making quite a bit, and we can just kind of translate it into the hot shop as well. So welcome into the hot shop to those who recently joined in. We are working on something like you see on the front pedestals on either side of me in the front of the hot shop. Sticking with the same theme of this rainbow twisted striping, but other than that, we're seeing a ton of different shapes, forms made in the hot shop. So at the center bench here, we've already blown out our bubble quite a bit. We're at the point where we're starting to get a little bit more of our shape by hanging it down towards the floor with some heat, and that's just stretching the glass out into a longer, narrower shape. And then we can blow this out further at the bench, guiding which way it blows out by using this pad of newspaper. So this is just folded up newspaper that will splash with a little bit of water. So we're rolling the glass on the marver again after making that divot in the bubble. And kind of behind the scenes, Gabe is capping the end of the pipe when he's doing this because this pipe works like a straw. If we apply pressure to the glass, air can escape. So we will maintain that pressure inside by capping the end of the pipe. And I think that he is trying to basically fold this glass onto itself. So we're going to have essentially this ring on the inside of folded glass kind of pushed inward. Yeah, so I know you guys didn't see it earlier because it was kind of subtle to begin with, but when he was folding the glass onto itself, it started to fold unevenly and it just got more and more like, this all the way around. So he was just messing with it, having some fun with it before he had to throw it away. So that's actually the only piece that hasn't turned out today, which is pretty cool. Just goes to show their expertise. And again, each of these are only taking 20 to 30 minutes, so if you want to see one completed, we'll have another one started pretty soon.